Hey, what's up, y'all? James here, and I'm going to dive into this sample project P&L. Now, this is not obviously the only way to do it, and this is kind of a bare bones approach. You can obviously get way more granular. You can really dive way down deep, but I really want to hit this from like a 30,000 foot view. Give you guys some things to think about. Now, I'll tell you, I didn't do these early on. I would just do some real rough math on napkin type stuff, and it led to a lot of mistakes and a lot of oofs. So I think these are incredibly important to do when you're planning out your crowdfunding campaign. And then obviously you can take the same principles from this to do for other projects that aren't crowdfunding. So let's just jump right in. What I've got for you here is this is just, again, a really rough spreadsheet that's going to show you generally the things that you should be thinking about, how you calculate your profit margin, and one of the things I'm going to be harping on during this is you need to be shooting for a 30% profit margin. Now, what that's going to do is that is going to make you make some decisions, and we'll talk about that a little bit as I go through. And I might actually have to break this up into a couple of different videos, but we'll just see how far we can get. So the main thing to start thinking about, obviously I have just game thrown up here in this category, but if you have multiple pledge levels, you need to do this for each pledge level because obviously each pledge level has a different cost. So like if you had a retail game, oh gosh, I can't type. If a retail standard version, right? But then you also had a deluxe, and let's say you have add-ons. You should do this for all of these, but for this, what we're going to do here, we're just going to assume you have one, this deluxe edition. That's what you're doing. Now, when you do a forecast, you should do this for low, medium, high. Medium, I would say, would be, this is what I really expect my campaign to do. Let's say, for you, let's say that is, you say it's 3,000. I think I can do 3,000 units of this game. On the low end, let's say it's 2,000, and let's say on the high end, like the campaign goes bonkers and you do 7,500. Okay. So I would play out a forecast for all three, and you can keep obviously doing these scenarios to ad nauseum if you want. But I think this is a really good place to just get yourself some general ideas. Let's just say for easy math, we've got a $50 game. Now the thing is, obviously, this doesn't matter for this, right? When you set your price, if we're talking about the same edition, this price point doesn't change. Okay, so then you're just gonna do your math out. If you're a spreadsheet wizard, obviously you can have all of this automated. I am not. I have a few things automated, but for the most part, I kind of like doing it individually. But one day I'm gonna have somebody show me, or I'm gonna go on YouTube and get all trained up on the ways of. I know Mike Pascal right now is rolling his eyes so hard at me, but that's that. Okay. So then I've got platform fees at 9%. And probably actually for the sake of just doing this, I'll probably just work on what would be your middle number here. And then you can always go back and fill these other ones in. So your platform fees, I've got 9% because Kickstarter is going to take 5%, and then your Stripe is going to take anywhere from 4 to 5% typically. But I think 9 is a good, average on in most cases. What's happened? Oh no. There we go, internet. We need the internet to work. Thank you. Appreciate it. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time here on the COGS line because this is pretty important. COGS in this category for me is just your cost per unit to make the game. This needs to be 20% of your cost or less. So what I mean by that is 50 bucks times 0.2 is $10. So that gives you $10 per unit. You obviously can go over this, but you're going to have a hard time hitting a 30% profit margin if your costs are too high, right? So this is going to put some guardrails on your strategy, on your game. I can give you a ton of examples of where I did not follow this and it was not good, right? So here's what you got to do. You got to say, all right, well, I've got $10. If 20% is my max, if 20% is my top end of costs here on a $50 game, that's $10. But you get your quote back, and at 3,000 units, maybe it's $12, right? But maybe it's $10 at 7,500 units, but you're not sure if you're going to hit that. You should calculate all this out based on your units and the cost per unit at the different amounts so that you know truly what your profit margin would be no matter where you fall on the forecast, right? We're going to assume for this, though, that your 20% is good here, right? That $10 per unit is going to hold. And so in this scenario, we've got 3,000 units. So that's a $30,000 cost right there. Again, now this is where if you come back and you're like, all right, 3,000 units, my costs are $12. That means you should have a $60 price point. This is where I feel, and maybe some other folks will back me up on this in the comments from the industry, this is where mistakes are made, especially when it comes to crowdfunding. Because people want to underprice their game so that it moves. And let me just say, there are certain games, like if this was a family price, like a deluxeified family game, you're going to have a hard time getting people to give you $60 and even 50. 50 is going to be the top end, I would think, just from old market kind of evaluation, right? This is where I think people are they're just used to, like, that's the top end that I want to spend on a family game, even though the pricing to make games has went up substantially. This is just market evaluation that you're going to have to deal with. So you really need to be honest with yourself and say, what do I think my game is going to be perceived value-wise? And if you're going to need to make that adjustment. So like in this case, let's say we know 50 is the top end, but your costs are $12 right now. You should be looking at your build out, your quote, and seeing where you could cut something or take something out or reduce something that costs a lot, right? Because you really need to be closer to $10. And honestly, if you can get under $10, that's even better. 20 should be the top end. I might, if you think you're going to have volume, maybe you can go 21, 22%, but that would be the absolute most, okay? So your production, your molds, your art, this is just, obviously I'm lumping several things in here, but these are kind of more fixed costs, things that you may have already spent money on. Your production's going to have things like prototypes that you've made, any sort of expense you've spent on getting materials to make the game, that sort of thing. Your molds, if you have minis or any sort of upfront cost that you pay that's not a part of the cost per unit, this can go here, and then your art budget. So in this case, let's just say you spent 10 grand on art, you've got about 5 grand in molds, and then about 2,500. I think I just did that math in my head. Should be 17.5. So anyway, you're just going to have to put whatever those costs are into that bracket. Your freight. So this is ocean freight. This is getting it from the factory to the ports onto a boat across the waters, and then trucked from that next port into wherever you are doing fulfillment. Right now, at least what we're seeing is $15,000 to $17,000 for a 40-foot container. I know there are a lot of people online that say that you can get them cheaper than that, but I've checked several. I've talked to other publishers, and this is kind of the average right now. There are 1,000 different variables into what brings up that price and how people kind of come to their number. But generally, I would say if you take what your ocean freight is and add a few $1,000s, that's going to get you a nice round number. So let's just say it's $20,000 for a 40 foot, and that's going to also take care of a lot of your other little fees. Now, this is where you need to know with your manufacturer, how many units can I get into a 40-foot container? Some of them are going to say, and again, there's a lot of different scenarios. Where you're shipping your games to, you need to talk to them. Do they take floor-loaded containers? Some of them won't. They were going to want the games on pallets. Well, if you put the games on pallets, there's a big unit difference in what you can get in a 40-foot container versus floor-loaded. So you need to check, like, it's kind of a domino effect, right? Like you have several different factors that can determine what happens here. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that, and then obviously where these containers need to go. If you're doing a worldwide fulfillment and your total units is 3,000, there's going to be some that needs to go to Europe, EU. There's going to be some that needs to come to North America. There's going to be some that needs to go to Asia. And there's going to be some that probably needs to go to Australia. Because those are typically your 4 big hubs. So you're looking at probably, in that case, for 3,000 units, let's say this is a normal size game, you're probably looking at maybe 140-footer, depending to the U.S., and then maybe 3 20-footers. Unfortunately, the 20-footers aren't just half price. They're about 3/4 of the price. They are less, but they're not. You would think, oh, it's half. No, it's just unfortunately how it is. So in that case, let's say we've got 20 and 20, and then 12, 12, and 12. So this adds up pretty quickly. That your freight could be pretty expensive. Now, obviously, this is probably a little high, but you would rather build out your P&Ls in a conservative model as opposed to not, because you don't want to lie to yourself. Yeah. Okay, so commissions are going to be taken care of. Any your designer commissions. If you've worked with an artist that you're working on a commission with, whatever your commissions are, you want to plug this in here. So let's just say, for easy math, you have a 7%. That's not 75. That'd be too much. That'd be strong. You'd have all the designers wanting to work with you. Let's say you get a 7% off the net of your Kickstarter with your designers. So that would be the net, at least the way that I've done things like that in the past, is after the platform fee. That's what the money that we actually get from the net. So in this case, that'd be 136.5. So you times that by 0.7, and that's going to be 9,555. Bang. Now, so again, and this number is easy to adjust. Put it in however you want. Your contracts are gonna, build out the variables here. You might have marketing built in that gets subtracted out of your total. There's lots of different ways to set that up. So but be cognizant that you need to pop that in. Marketing, I 5% is my base. I definitely spend more than that sometimes, all the way up to 10%, depending on the campaign. But I think 5 is your minimum, and I do that off the gross. I calculate that off the gross of your bring home here of the. Hold on, my brain just turned off for a second because when I start trying to multitask, it just goes what? 5% of the campaign gross. So that would be at 5%. That'd be $7,500. Now, not addition. Duh. Now the thing here is this is gonna in your marketing, any how to play videos, any previews that you had, all of that comes out of this budget. And then anything you spend on ads for like BGG, Facebook, backer kit, any of that kind of stuff, that's going to come out of this. So, this is a great way to set up, like when you're doing forecasts, how much money do I have to spend on marketing? Are the things that I want to do aligning with this? If not, you're in trouble. Down here, shipping sub. Now this is my way of doing this. Okay, this is how I look at shipping. Because of Amazon, because people expect shipping to be free, because it's been so devalued, right? This makes it tough, especially when you're already like, look, team, our total's 150. We're already at 134, so there's not much money left. Let's just say that you can afford $5. I can subsidize whatever the shipping cost is going to be. So you get your quotes. Hey, it's going to be $17 to ship this game to most places in the U.S. I can subsidize that by $5, so you can offer it for $12. I truly believe you have to offer some shipping subsidy to make your shipping prices look more attractive. And that's just the way it is. Okay. Unfortunately, but let's just say you're doing $5 and we've got 3,000 units. That's $15,000. This is not looking too hot, is it? So right now, your leftover on this category is 149. You've oh, what did I just do? Hitting buttons. You've netted $945. Not a percentage. What is this thing doing? I must have this formatted funny. Oh, I think I rearranged this for this. You got to come up into your format and turn that back into accounting. Thank you very much. 495 smeckles. Currently, your profit margin is, because you divide your net back into your total, it's not even at 1%. It's this is 0.0063. So that's bad. Okay, so what do we need to do here in this? I think we've got a lot of money tied up in freight. Your production molds, you might be able to spend less on art. You might be able to get your COGS down a little bit. But let's just say that this is the low end, because sometimes what you're going to see is, our COGS go down substantially at 7,500 units compared to 3,000. So you might have to run this a couple times. Let me just do this. Will take me a minute. Unfortunately, this is where Mike is going to yell at me, because I can hear him. Yelling at me, because you could just plug these things in and you wouldn't have to do this manually. But it's part of what I do. I need to learn it. I need to stop putting off excuses. I just need to get this done. Okay, so let's say that at 7,500 units, your COGS go down to let's see, what would be reasonable? Probably, let's just say $8.25. Okay, so 825 times 7,500 equals 61,875. Okay, this is going to probably be about the same. This isn't going to move, but that's actually kind of nice, because this is spread out over more units than it is here, so your cost per unit gets better because it's a fixed cost. So that's nice. Now this may not change a whole lot, because more than likely in your previous scenario you weren't completely full. And again, I probably put this at 2. This is probably too high for 3,000 units. So let's just say we're probably going to need about the same, but maybe one of those is going to bump up to another container. So that's 20 and 20, and then what I say, 12 and 12. So that's 64. So that's not bad, right? Like, you're getting better efficiencies at this point. All right, 375 times 0.91, that's your net. So it's 341,250 times 0.7. So your commissions at this point are 23,887.5. Boom. Marketing still the same. We're gonna be not the same. 375. You've got a bigger total. So that 5%, you get to grow your marketing budget a bit. 18,750. And then the shipping sub, we're still sticking for $5, right? So $5, but there's more units now, so that goes up. 37.5. Okay. Whoa, that's 300. I was like, wait a minute. I thought we did better this time. Okay, we've got some money left over this time. Yay, 375 minus 257, 262.50 is, let me make sure this formatting is right on this one. I probably should have put it across the board on all of these. 117,737.5. All right, divide that back into 375. Beep, 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 beep. Look at this, boys and girls and non-boys and girls. 31.9% profit margin. And the only things that really changed, right, are we got some more efficiency out of our freight, and our COGS came down on the units. Now, if you're able to get that cost per unit down on your midline, on your mid, I'm just gonna hold on. I'm gonna do low, mid, high forecast, and this is on a deluxe unit. You can still get a much better profit margin. This is where doing these P&Ls is pretty important, right? So what's great here is I know some people are like, oh, you know, if you're not in the industry, if you're not a publisher, you're looking at that and going, I would love to make a game and clear $117,000. Now remember, this $117,000 doesn't include taxes, so you don't get to keep all of that money. This doesn't include insurances. This doesn't include any sort of miscellaneous costs. This is just assuming everything goes to plan. Let me give you a great little story. So back when we were laying this thing out for, say, Wonderland's War, our ocean freight costs were calculated off of the $6,000-$7,000 cost for a 40-foot container at that time. Well, then the pandemic hit, and that went bonkers, and they ended up costing 6x, 6 times as much. And we needed a lot of containers for Wonderland's War because it's a really big game. That's the other thing to think about when you're making your game. So these units, 7,500 Karubas, right, can fit much nicer, many more than 7,500 Wonderland's Wars. We only get about 1,400 deluxe editions in a 40-foot container, whereas I could probably get 7,500 Karubas in a single one, right? So that's that's going to affect this number substantially. But if this, just for the sake of showing you what we mean, was 6 times as much as you thought, there you go. You're $200,000 in the hole. I mean, that number is no longer accurate, right? So that's where, you know, having your estimates as accurate as possible is great. But when people see, let me just go back. So that's bonk, bonk, bonk. You don't get to keep this money. Like, it covers, this is why you need a 30% profit margin. Because you've got to pay for incidentals. You've got to pay for things that come up. Because if you can't and you go back and you're like, oh, guys, sorry, it was much more expensive than I thought. I need you to give me $25 more each to be able to ship you these games. You know, you're not going to have any goodwill with your backers. They're going to be very upset with you. And whether it's right or wrong, it's just the way it is, right? And so there's a lot that you can do with this money. Obviously, you got to pay yourself. You got to pay taxes. You got to pay for insurances. There's 1,000 things that go cost-wise into, running a business. All of that has to come out of your profits for the project. So if you're here, when you lay out things, and you think, wow, yeah, 3,000 is still probably going to be hard for me to do. I've never had a campaign do 3,000 units, or I haven't done one before. You know, this can really be eye-opening on whether or not you should even be doing crowdfunding, right? This is why it's not all easy when people are just like, I'll just do it myself. it's rough. It can be rough. You really need volume. Volume is what allows you to really have the opportunity to take some chances, right? So anyway, the way that I would typically do this if I was setting this up is I would do a low, medium, high of my what I think is going to be my main pledge level. But I'm going to do this for every pledge level that I have. Then I'm going to estimate the percentage of the campaign that I think is going to happen within those, and then extrapolate all those numbers into a total profit margin for the campaign. And if you have add-ons, you need to do this for the add-ons. You don't have to do a low, medium, high for every add-on, but you need to see like, hey, I think I'm going to move 500 playmats. So then you pop in your units, you pop in your pricing, you do all of this. You do all of this for that as well, and you see, because if you aren't at least at 30% profit margin, you might need to think about whether or not you, for that individual item, whether or not you need to offer it. So some of this P&L homework, right, will give you the guardrails on how or why you should offer something. And, that was one of the things that, oh my, I didn't get to do that. I don't know why my camera's stuck. My face is frozen. I was going to talk to you, but oh well. Well, let's put this back up there. Like on a great example is Grim Forest, where we just put too much stuff in that box, and that game needed to be $10 to $15 more for what the cost of the game was, how big it was to ship, and then we were like, oh, free shipping, which was, at the time, that's what you really had to do, and that it killed the P&L for that. This is the boring part. This is the not fun part of making games, but it's super necessary. And the better you get at this, the better you'll know what you can and what you cannot offer for your game, right? For your project. And it will keep you from making a big mistake. And then, I would, in this case, I have a line here. Sometimes I'll just go ahead and put miscellaneous in here for 10% and add that as a negative cost, just so I have a buffer of if things go wrong, something comes back. Something we should talk about really quickly is what'll happen is before a campaign's launched and when you're determining what you're going to charge for your game, you may tell the manufacturer, here's my quote, here's what I'm going to put in the game. But let's say you get into the campaign and people ask for several different things that you didn't have planned. And so you cave to that pressure and you add those things. Well, you can't go back and change the price of your game at this point. So you need to before you add anything, you need to run it through your P&L and see, is it going to sink your project? Is it going to cut your profit margin way under 30%? Because if so, you shouldn't offer it. You shouldn't add it. You should tell them, hey, that is a good idea. And in normal cases, I'd like to, but it's going to cost too much money and it's going to hurt me financially. And then if people are like, but we want that dice or we want those cards, you can always build it as an add-on. That way you don't sink your P&L and you take care of things responsibly financially, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the gist of what's happening here. Again, all of these things, all of these brackets are going to, this isn't going to change. Like 9% platform fee, that's pretty standard. This is a big variable depending on what you're making, what type of game you're making, that sort of thing. This is a really big variable. Maybe you do the art yourself. Maybe you're your own artist, so you don't have any hard costs. I mean, you should still calculate a way to pay yourself, but maybe you're okay with not paying yourself because you just want to make your game and you do their own art. Well, then this number's lower. Maybe you don't have anything that needs a mold. That number's lower. It could be really, really small. Maybe you've got a really, really small game that you can pack into you can pack a ton in there, and this number is substantially lower. It's probably not a $50 game at that point, so all of this adjusts. Maybe you're the designer, so you don't have a percentage that you need to pay out, so that's money that you get to keep. This one, I'm going to argue 5% should be your base. 5% should be the bottom of the barrel for marketing. You should spend at least 5% marketing. Like I said, I've spent all the way up to 11 or 12% on a campaign, just depending on its profit margin. If you have a higher profit margin, you have some, a couple percentage points to play with, you can spend more, which will drive more volume, which then just gets, that math works. But 5% should, I believe, should be your base. I think a more comfortable spot is probably 7 to 8%. But again, that just depends on what you're hoping to do and the volume that you expect and your profit margin. And then last, I already talked about it a bit. It's going to be hard for you to get away with no shipping subsidy, right? Especially if you have a bigger game. Let's say you have a Wonderlands War that weighs 12 pounds and the shipping quote comes back and it's $37.50. People are going to freak out. The game's $50 and the shipping's almost as much as it is to buy the game. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a heavy game this is what it costs to be shipped. I see that this is where I talk about shipping is a pass-through cost. Like we don't have any markup. In most industries, they mark up their costs. You go to you go to get an alternator put on your car at a dealership because your alternator went out. They mark up the cost of that alternator. It's marked up. We don't get to do that. We don't get to go, well, it's $37.50, so let me mark that up 10% so that I don't lose money. Because here's the thing. The reason places do that is we're still spending a huge amount of our bandwidth, our time. If you have team members, you're paying an employee to work on this, and there's as much, I don't want to say as much, there's a ton of effort and time and bandwidth put into figuring out all the logistics that it takes to get you the game. So this is where normally people will mark that up. Well, we don't. We pass it through. And in this case, we're subsidizing it. We're literally eating into our profits to just try to make it more palatable. And, again, we don't control at all the costs associated with shipping a game from point A to point B. It's just what it costs. And if any of y'all have went down to a FedEx or a UPS or even a USPS recently and tried to ship anything of actual notable size, I'm talking 8 pound, 10 pounds or plus, that's a decent size. It's got to go into a decent size box. Let's just say you need something that's in a square 12 by 12 and it weighs 10 pounds and it needs to go 7-8 states away if you're in the US. That's going to cost $30. I don't know. I'm just shooting off the hip, but it's not cheap, right? The days of something costing $10 to ship are kind of over. I mean, Amazon's even went, obviously if you've noticed, when they first started doing this, they had free shipping. Everything was free if you had Prime, and it came through UPS or whatever. Well, Amazon's went to the point of they got rid of shipping things through USPS. Everything's no longer next day free. It gets here when it gets here. It's not even an option anymore. And they bought their own trucks and they pay their own drivers because it was costing them too much money. Long story short, you got to do what you can here. And if you work out the math and you're like, listen, I can't, like in this case right here, I can't afford this. So let's say I can't change any of these other things. Like these things, I'm locked in. I hope I get here so that I get a break on my per unit. But if I don't, this is just what I envision the game has to have. Maybe you can't offer this, right? And then you get to add 15% or 15,000 back to that. 15,495 divided into the 150. That would get you at least 10.3%. So let's see right there, 10% of your profit just went out the window just because you need to be able to try to compete with Amazon, which we can't do. We can't compete with Amazon. So, yeah, these are just some big buckets. Again, there's other buckets. You can get more granular. You can really dive in further. You can add lines for, like, if you've got salaries and you've got your taxes percentages built out, you can add all those lines in there and then look at the number even more granularly. But I feel like this is a real basic, like, hey, I want to do a Kickstarter. Where do I start with a profit and loss spreadsheet? That's what P&L stands for, by the way, profits and losses. And you're gonna probably, depending on who you talk to, if, like, Scott Gata was in here, he might say, oh, we would never spend 20%, or maybe I spend 25%. I mean, this is the part of, there is no black and white, this is the only way to do business type of setup. So, Ivan Van Norman saw my posts when I was talking about this, said, hey, I can send you my template. I've been refining it for years. I haven't seen it yet. I want to see that, right? I want to see how my other peers in this do this, and maybe there's something I can learn. Maybe there's something they track that I don't, that's been a mistake. Maybe they track things differently. Maybe, he pops in and is like, hey, it's got to be 18% or less. All those things are good. Maybe they're like, you gotta start at a 50% profit margin, because once you take out taxes and salary and you're down to, like, a very small profit margin. Anyway, all that to say, I hope this was helpful. I hope me explaining each line item, at least the way that I see them, explains things a bit more. And then I hope that you guys understand that folks that are making these games aren't, they're not on the beach in Cancun with umbrella drinks after a Kickstarter, because you might see $1 million on a Kickstarter and go, but you got $1 million. No, we did not. We did not get $1 million. And more than likely, people are still really, really stressed out even then. So, all that to say, here you go. This is what I promised. I wanted to at least get the conversation started. If you have questions or comments, just throw them in the comment section. Happy to dive into that. All right, y'all. Talk to you soon. Bye.